Okay, today I'm going to be talking about India meets Greece, exchanges of religion and culture along the trade routes. Now, I have to tell you ahead of time that the last time I presented this particular talk, it was at an academic forum. So at Cal State Fullerton. So I'm going to try to, it's going to be fun, but there's some technical words here and there. I apologize ahead of time. And still, I think it's going to be interesting for most of you. Okay, so as a historian, archaeologist, and scholar of religion, my presentation will focus upon the primary evidence as discovered in both written and archaeological sources, and within the parameters of what's called the Axial Age, which is between 700 to 500 BCE, through all the way to the time of the Roman Empire, and centered geographically from the Mediterranean basin to the Indian subcontinent, and further east when appropriate, but this is mainly the Mediterranean and India. Okay, now in this study, the question must be asked, why is it important to study cultural crossroads in regards to religious ideas and symbols? Why is this important? Why are we here? Why are we talking about the crossroads? Well, here we go. First of all, the crossroads are important to study because within most religions and beliefs throughout history, and even today, it is often the cross-pollination of ideas from multiple sources that account for their complexity. Seriously, there are no great ideas without interaction and conflict. Seriously. Cross-pollination frequently accounts for the evolution of religious thoughts and practices as well throughout ancient history. These ideas often came away via the trade routes. Today, of course, it is often, unfortunately, the internet. That's our own means of exchange, is it not, right? Second, all too often within academia and in popular culture, the belief in divisions between religions are emphasized rather than connections. The divisions between religions are emphasized rather than connections. Hence, while Western religions like Judaism and Christianity and Islam are habitually connected to one another, they're called the Abrahamic religions, right? Other influences, such as the Greco-Roman influence or Zoroastrianism or other ideas including Eastern religions, are oftentimes, well, ignored, right? So what happens, of course, is we lose so much in the way of context. Third, the examination of the trade routes and the realization that so many religious ideas moved along them and were in fact often modified by them competes against, this is my favorite sentence right here, ready set stereotypes of developmental isolation asserted by various religious groups that are intended to support agendas based upon their own prejudicial perspectives against other religious ideas and expressions. That's a mouthful, is it not? Right? Don't you agree, though, right? They, in fact, often believe that many of their own internal religious doctrines are threatened by recognizing the reality of such fluid encounters along these trade routes. This realization is important more than ever today, especially our political and religious atmosphere. And we need to be, I like to say this, building bridges rather than walls, right? Okay. Fourth, the investigation of religions along the trade routes also reveals how beliefs are modified by the local cultures they encounter, often in order to accommodate already deeply established traditions and symbols. Because of this tendency, we are able to learn more about the general makeup and strength of the indigenous beliefs and cultural understandings by examining how they react when they interact with another belief system, right? Because of this fact, right, Any given belief or practice originally central to the respective religion from its place of origin may encounter one of the following value responses. You guys ready? You'll find this very important in any kind of interactions, not just the crossroads, but any mixing of ideas within any context. And here it goes. Okay, first of all, right, number one, you have what's called value conversion, where the localized culture replaces their existing cultural values with a new one. So these new ideas come about and they go, oh, okay, I guess we'll give up our ideas and we'll accept yours instead, right? The second one is value creation, where new ideas are developed to apply to new situations. So when they encounter these different ideas, they go, oh, you know what? We have to create our own idea, our own rebuttal, our own perspective regarding this or that question, right? Because sometimes certain cultures haven't thought of certain ideas yet, you know, and they're encountering these ideas for the first time and they have to respond in some way. So they have to create a response. Number three is value connection, where a conceptual link is developed between phenomena previously thought unconnected or connected in a different way. So the idea is there's maybe a link, you know, maybe this idea connects with that idea. Maybe they're synergetic. And we'll see a few of that, especially when it comes to beliefs and ideas, when it comes to philosophy in India and the pre-Socratic philosophers. You're like, there seems to be something going on here. You know, what is going on is, of course, another question. The next is value exclusion, where the localized culture cannot accept the value because it directly conflicts with already deeply established values. So it's like, no, we're going to say no to this new idea. And by the way, the first three are typical, but the 4 and 5 I actually created myself as far as value connections. So hey, there you go. So this is the Rietveld plot here, right? Okay, number 5 is value symbolic superficial appropriation. I love this one, and I had to create a category for this. And that is that where the localized culture adopts what at first appears to be the idea or practice from its outer appearance, but which is understood in a partial or completely different way by the localized culture. It may look like something, but it doesn't mean that it is something. It may mimic an exterior idea, but internally, it's a whole nother idea. The outer trappings look one way, but inside it's different. You guys got it? So these are some of the tools that we will be using and looking at. Okay, so I got to start with Alexander the Great, even though we're going to step back a little bit, but you got to start typical, right? So Alexander the Great, he conquered the Persian Empire, and he decided to continue east and conquer India as well. This happened in 326 BCE. He arrived in the Gandhara region, which is approximately the area of northern Pakistan, and going into northeastern Afghanistan today. By the way, we're going to learn a lot about Afghanistan, if you don't mind, because that was very Greek at one time. Ooh, I've already thrown you off, didn't I? Good, fun. And invited the rulers, he did, of the region to come to him and submit. Ami, the ruler of Taxila, which of course did indeed submit, his kingdom went all the way to the Indus River. So I have to tell you this, Alexander the Great did conquer one entire Indian kingdom. When people say, it just drives me crazy, when people say that Alexander the Great, he got to the Indus River, he got to India, and then he turned away, and that was the end of it. This is not true, because he was already in India. I know it's hard for us to understand today, But ancient India is a lot larger than modern India. Ancient India includes, of course, India. It includes, my voice is cracking. It includes Pakistan. In many cases, it includes Afghanistan. It includes also, of course, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. That is India. Got it? It's larger. And in some cases, they even throw in the Thai and Burma. I don't know. They call that the greater India area. So pretty large spread, right? And you have Indian kingdoms, which we'll talk about, that in some cases span large areas of that geographical location. So he got to India. Now think to yourself, not just to India, he got into India. And I want you to understand that here, when people say, is there a connection between the Greeks and India? I go, well, guess what? Part of India was part of this Hellenistic empire that was created by Alexander the Great. So how more intimate can you possibly get, right? So of course there's connections. Isn't that strange that, you could go to Athens and then you can go, you can go all the way to the Indus River, and that's all part of the same empire. And that's going to, of course, continue. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so he got to the Indus River, but there is, unfortunately, he met some resistance from a king by the name of Porus, a remarkable man. And they also had to encounter, elephants. Elephants kind of throw us off a little bit, so what happens is the elephants start throwing people around. I actually do have a source here. Arian knows this. Upon this, the elephants at the Battle of Hydas River, applying to their good use of their prodigious size and strength, killed some of the enemy by trampling under their feet and crushing their armor and their bones. While upon others they inflicted a terrible death, for they first lifted them aloft with their trunks, which they then twisted around their bodies and then dashed them down with great violence to the ground. Many others they deprived in a moment of life by goring them through and through with their tusks. So yeah, it's a bad situation. The battle did not go very well for our friend Alex, but what happened there is he still reached the Indus River. He still got there, but his men, after this disaster and also the rushing water of this great river, they had enough, and they said, "We're going. We're leaving. This is it. We're not going any further." They rebelled and they turned around. And here we go, and your book's closed, and you think that's the end of the story. No, it's not. Why? Because the Greeks stayed at the Indus River. What? They stayed. They built colonies there. They built cities there. Wow, is this fascinating? They didn't leave. After all, Alexander the Great died, this area came under the control of the Seleucids, who are, of course, another Hellenistic empire who held it for hundreds of years. Are you guys waking up yet? Is this interesting, right? So yeah, we're going to learn a lot here, but there we go. Now, this is not the only time, and this is not the first time that the Greeks encountered India prior to Alexander the Great. There have been ties with the West for quite a while. Trade routes had long been established between these areas. The funny thing is that this happened during what's called the Axial Age. This is a period of time where you have almost this movement of the democratization of religion. The idea is we are tired of the fact that the priestly caste or groups have all the exclusive knowledge. They're in charge of all the rituals, and we say no to that. We want to have an independent relationship and or an independent kind of connection with the gods, the goddesses, the spirits, the deities. The Axial Age is when suddenly the information moves from the caste, upper castes, or I should say the priestly castes, down to everybody else. It is the birth of philosophy. Philosophy that goes from the area of, well, of course, India to China and all the way to the West. And let's give you some evidence here. Take a look. Here let's go across Eurasia. Confucius. Now, these are approximate dates. They won't always be exact, but they are in general the right centuries. You guys got it? So here it is. Confucius, he lived from 551 to 479. He founded Confucianism. Lao Tzu, of course, that's Taoism, 604 to 531 BCE. Mahavira, 599 to 527 BC, founded Jainism, right? Buddha, 563 to 483, founded Buddhism. Do you guys see anything that's familiar? Hey, that's all the 6th century, isn't it? BCE. At this time also, you're going to have a huge shift in Judaism from the priests to the people. And this is during the Babylonian captivity. Maybe that was too. Captivity, which was also, by the way, the same exact century. And this is also the same time as the pre-Socratic philosophers in Greece. So there you have it. From China all the way to the Mediterranean, philosophy is about. And the trade routes are opening up. The trade routes open up quite a bit because you're going to have the Persian Empire, right? The Persian Empire has what's called that Royal Road. The Royal Road, it was paved. First of all, it started at the Aegean port of the city of Ephesus. And then it ran through Mesopotamia, along the Tigris River, to Susa in Iran. And there's an extension that continued on to Persepolis. How long did it take? Well, a caravan, it took 90 days to travel this road from Ephesus all the way to Persepolis. 90 days. That's not too shabby. But if you're using Pony Express, it only took 2 weeks from Ephesus to Persepolis, right? Because there's 111 postal stations where they switched off the horses. Now, guess what? The road then continued to the Indus River. How long did that take? Well, by Pony Express, it took another week. So you could go, right, from the Aegean, or the Mediterranean, to India in 3 weeks. So when people tell me there's no connection to India, you know, well, you got roads, you know, you got communication. See, this is where I think it's crazy, because I think there's so many groups that believe that all these ideas, all these religions, all these cultures grew up in isolation. And working in archaeology as I do, I can tell you emphatically that is not true. It's never the case. When I take a look at the material culture, I find trade goods from all over the place. I find trade goods at Ephesus that goes far to the east and far to the west. I find Celtic materials. I find Nordic materials, and I even find some materials, including coins, that come from all the way from China. So when people tell me there's no connection, I say pick up a spade and start to dig at an archaeological site in the Greco-Roman period, and you'll discover that there's lots of connections. Does this help? And we got trade goods, we got pottery, it's all there. Okay, so I made my point, right? And the other part is this, is that we know the exact name of those who traveled these trade routes to share their different beliefs and ideas. They were called Shramanas. Shramanas. So just as you have people who are trading various goods and services, they're trading, you know, with ivory or spices, and, you know, cinnamon or incense or all these kinds of goods. There were also those who are going about and they're selling religion. They're selling their beliefs because they believe so much in their philosophies and the democratization of knowledge. They want everybody to hear whatever they have to profess. So along with all these traders in these very long caravans that are going around slowly, you're going to have many of these philosopher types walking about, and they do have a name for them, right? The Shramanas. What's interesting is a lot of the Shramanas, of course, obviously are from India. They believe, they teach this new idea that was very different from what's called Brahmanism, and that because Brahmanism and Hinduism are two different beliefs. I want to mention that because Brahmanism, it is brought in by the Indo-Europeans, by those of the Aryans, and yes, they have believed in the Vedic traditions, the Vedas, but how it was interpreted will be different from the way it is interpreted under Hinduism. And it's interesting, for the fact is that first of all, Brahmanism doesn't have the idea of karma. Brahmanism doesn't have the idea of reincarnation. Brahmanism doesn't have the stock features that we are used to within Hinduism. But the Shramanas are teaching reincarnation. The Shramanas are teaching karma. The Shramanas are teaching the cycle, the wheel of life. First of all, you are born, you live your life, you die, and you're reborn. And depending upon whether you do good actions or bad actions, you either move up with the good actions with each lifetime, or you move on down and you become part of the mundane realm. And you move on up, you have this idea known as moksha, right? Revelation. Now, of course, these Shramanas are connected to a particular work that is not the Vedas, but were added on. Actually, the funny thing is, there's a work called the Brahmanas, which goes into the fact that there's a problem going on with the Vedas. It's saying, there's something wrong with the idea that if you're wealthy, if you're the upper caste, if you are a Brahma, or a Kshatriya or a Vaishya, you have the upper three castes, you can literally get away with murder as long as you give the priests, the Brahmins, enough in order to compensate. While the Shudras are going, hey, this is not fun. And the Shudras, by the way, are those who are non-Indo-Europeans. So what I think is interesting, right? So the upper castes, which is only 30% of the population, by the way, by the 700s, were the Indo-Europeans. The 70%, guess what, were the Shudras, who are mostly Mundas and Dravidians in stock. And they still worship their localized gods and goddesses. Are you guys getting this? So, so what happens is a democratization of knowledge. The Shramanas come along, they're teaching their ideas, and all of a sudden, one famous Shramana, his name is Mahavira. They call him a Shramana, and you got Jainism. There's another famous Shramana, you know his name well, and they call him a Shramana by name, and his name is Buddha. Buddha is a Shramana. And then you have all these other Hindu philosophers, they call them Gymnosophists, and they are the founders of what will become Hinduism. They're rebelling against the system. So with the death of Brahmanism, you don't get one religion, you get three. You got Buddhism, you got Hinduism, and you got Jainism. Isn't that fascinating? And this is during the Axial Age. So these Shramanas are spreading their wares and ideas. And do the Greeks and Romans talk about them? All the time. They're constantly mentioned in Greek texts and in Latin texts. They're everywhere. It's funny because not only are they everywhere and big in public eye, not only do people from India live in different parts of Alexandria and Athens and other cities, but more than that, is that they had a cultural impact on the Greeks and Romans in so many different ways. It's so funny, in Asia Minor, we have grave inscriptions by Shramanas where they were buried. Is this good, right? We know them. We know who they are by reading the inscriptions. Now, it's interesting because taking a look at the sources, here we go. Accordingly, they were called by the Greeks and Romans, they called them Gymnosophists. Gymnosophists, which basically means naked wise men. So they were nude, walking about, or naked philosophers, Gymnosophists. And what happened is that we have sources that talk about the fact that there's a difference between Shramanas and Brahmins. And the Greeks and Romans knew about that. What's interesting is that this popular movement, often made up of religious men and mystics, were not of a particular caste, and so they were a threat. And it tried to persuade people not to always follow the Brahmins. You know, you got to follow your own way. And so these traveling Shramanas were painted as deceivers. But of course, the feeling was mutual. And the Brahmins, who were wanting to hold on to their power within Brahmanism, painted them as radicals to get rid of. No, people, don't listen to them. You can't go directly to the gods without us. We need your tithes. We need your offerings. We need you to want us to bless you.
Sound familiar?
It does, doesn't it? Right? One typical line went as follows. This, I actually have a line from a Brahmin. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Don't believe in them. When you're dead, you're dead. All their talk of karma is nonsense. If a man went north of the Ganges and murdered and tortured and stole and plundered and set buildings on fire, he would make no bad karma. If another man went south of the Ganges and gave the charity and helped the weak and healed the sick, he would make no good karma. You live as a combination of the four elements, but when you die, everything is finished. So borrow money and live as happily as you can, for when you're dead, they can't pursue you. That's terrible, right? Advice, right? So the Brahmins really hate these guys, right? All right. By the way, later in the 3rd century CE, the Neoplatonic philosopher Porphyry, quoting Bardensis, highlights a division between the Shramanas and the Brahmins. I know I'm getting technical, but if you want my sources, I can give it to you pretty quickly. This work, of course, is known on the absence from animal food. And he calls the Shramanas, he calls them Samanians. And it says as follows, of course, he says, for the polity of the Indians being distributed in many parts, there is one tribe amongst them of men divinely wise, whom the Greeks are accustomed to call gymnosophists. But there are two sects, over one of which the Brahmins preside, but over the other, the Samanians. The race of the Brahmins, however, received divine wisdom of this kind by succession, in the same manner as the priesthood. But the Samanians are elected and consist of those who wish to possess divine knowledge. There it is. So you have one, right? This is good, right? This is a Roman source talking about India, right? So you have, and there's a lot of history that we know about India at this time comes from the Greeks and Romans. You know that, right? So what happens is the fact that the Brahmins, it is through a succession, father to son and so forth, going on in this legacy that continues. But for the Shramanas, it's just like, are you inspired? Are you touched? Then go out and speak, right? And so it's different. Or by election, the people believe that you are something special, that the divine had touched you. Isn't this so very close to Eastern religions, right? The idea this person is touched in some way, well, touched in a good way, right? He's slightly touched. Okay, we won't go there. All right. Again, he says all the Brahmins originate from one stock, for all of them are derived from one father and one mother, but the Samanians are not the offspring of one family, being, as we have said, collected from every nation of the Indians. They're everywhere. Porphyry also says the Shramanas had experienced a certain kind of public consensus as a way as an initiation. So in other words, they have to appeal to the people. They have to, so they just, it's not by birth, it's by their appeal. The Samanians are, as we have said, elected. When, however, anyone is desirous of being enrolled in their order, he proceeds to the rulers of the city, but abandons the city or village that he inhabited, and the wealth and all the other property that he possessed, having likewise the superfluities of his body cut off, he receives a garment and departs to the Samnians, but does not return either to his wife or children, if he happens to have any, nor does he pay any attention to them, or think that they at all pertain to him. And with respect to his children, indeed, the king provides what is necessary for them, and the relatives provide for the wife. And such is the life of the Samnians, for they live out of the city and spend the whole day in conversation pertaining to divinity. They also have houses and temples built by the king. So there you have it, right? But also, we're going to have Strabo from the 1st century, another, right, Greco-Roman writer, famous geographer. He talks about it. He calls them the Sarmines. You know, a little different name, but pretty close. He says, on the Sarmines, excuse me, the most honorable, he says, are the Hylobi, who live in the forests and subsist on leaves and wild fruits. They are clothed with garments made of the bark of trees and abstain from commerce with women. That's so funny, commerce with women, and from wine. Okay. He also mentions another group known as the physicians. He says there's a second in honor are the physicians, for they apply philosophy to the study of the nature of man. They have frugal habits, but do not live in the fields, and subsist upon rice and meal, which everyone gives when asked, and receives them in a hospitable way. Both this and other class of persons practice fortitude, as well as supporting active toil as enduring suffering, so that they will continue a whole day in the same posture without motion. So, you know, it's fun listening to a Greco-Roman perspective of those from India doing meditation and being still in one pose. They still do that, right? Also, the Shermana's view on death, Periphery writes, they are so disposed with respect to death that they unwillingly endure the whole time of the present life as a certain servitude to nature, and therefore they hasten to liberate their souls from their bodies with which they are connected. Hence, frequently, when they are seen to be well and are neither oppressed nor driven by desperation by any evil, they depart from life. They just decide it's time to die, and they die. Once again, all these interesting practices that still continue to this day. The Shermanas traveled all over the Persian Empire. They walked this royal road. You know, everybody else is walking along, right? And they got to the city of Ephesus and continued across the Aegean Sea onto Greece. They went on to Rome, also the other direction. They went through Palestine. They were in Egypt. They were everywhere. And we have evidence for all this, and I have it all here. Is that great? Is this fun? Okay, so but it's interesting because along this royal road, where it empties is at Ephesus, and this is where, in this area, is where you have the pre-Socratic philosophers. The pre-Socratic philosophers are directly connected along this trade route, all the way from the Aegean, all the way to India. Isn't that interesting? So no wonder. You can think about it. Think about the Greeks for a little bit. Before you get to Socrates, right, and Plato and Aristotle, let's talk about all the great philosophical ideas that the Greeks came up with around mainland Greece. Mainland Greece, come on. Anybody? Mainland Greece. You're all Thales. No, that's Miletus. That's south of Ephesus. Anaximander. Oh, no, that's Miletus. That's south of Ephesus. Heraclitus. That's Ephesus. Oh, you see my point? Pythagoras, that's Samos, off the coast of Ephesus. Wait a second. The majority of the pre-Socratic philosophers are within a 50-mile radius of Ephesus and the exit of the Royal Road. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't it interesting? And let's talk about Thales. I like Thales. 624 to 546. He's from Miletus. I've been to Miletus 3 times. Has a great, beautiful theater, by the way. With a fortress on top. He was originally from the Levantine coast. He traveled everywhere from Egypt to Babylon and had much knowledge of science, astrology, math, right? And it's like, well, he got all the way to Babylon, and guess what? There's influences there. Moving on. Anaximander of Miletus. He was a student, pupil of Thales. And here it gets interesting. What do you mean? Because already we got something. In his cosmogony, Anaximander believed all things began with what is called a Peiron. A Peiron, A-P-E-I-R-O-N. A Peiron means the infinite. It means the unlimited. It means the indefinite. Rather, he believed that things started from this indefinite source rather than from a particular element such as water, which Thales had brought up, right? In fact, he believed that it was a combination of eternal motion and the aprion that was the primary cause of force, for the origins of the world. The word aprion specifically means that which is unlimited, that which is infinite, or indefinite, or without, right? So you're going to have this idea of without a peiron, n, or without limit. I even have the ionic other Greek here too, but it is readily applied to a Hindu concept. The Hindu concept is called nirvikalpa. Nirvikalpa means never alternative. It also means the idea of infinite, going on continuously, and also applied to the origin of all things. But you were going, well, is that enough? No, it's not, because I got more. So it goes on, it says, not admitting an alternative, and it's associated with the idea known as aditi, which is, again, limitless as a primary cause. We take a look at this and you realize, wait a minute, looking at the Aperion of Anaximander is almost exactly the Hindu Nirvikalpa, the nameless and formless, called Aditi, the unlimited, in the Rig Veda. Moreover, this Aditi, which is Nirvikalpa, is ordered by the immanent Rita. It's ordered by Rita or Dharma, which, of course, Rita is the idea of justice. Guess who says that everything is ordered by justice? Anaximander. He says it's DK. It's like, wait a second. I know it sounds really complicated, but if there's a similarity with one concept, okay, that's a coincidence. When you get to two concepts, it's getting a little scary. But when you have all three, you go, okay, that's a problem, right? There has to be some connection between those ideas. Does that make sense? Are you guys following me? Right? So you have this idea, but it continues. Heraclitus of Ephesus, he, of course, 535 to 475, he believes, of course, everything starts with a foundational fire, which is just the same as Buddhism, right? But he also has this famous saying that you can't step in the same river twice. By the way, which is constantly said by Buddha, and here's all the times that Buddha says that. So it's a big thing that Buddha likes to say, and you're seeing the evidence here. So yeah, so maybe it's a coincidence. No, it's because it's also connected to the idea of not just the saying, but the idea of the movement of the universe, the movement of time, and the idea that, well, ultimately, it's all an illusion, right? It's all going away. Heraclitus would say, yeah. And of course, Buddha would say, yeah, Maya, right? Is this making sense? Or you get a bigger picture here? And you're thinking we're done. No, we're not done. Empedocles, thank you. Empedocles has the idea of the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. And then, of course, later on, they'll add the idea of spirit. So these four elements are a big deal. Well, guess what? In Hinduism, you have elements. What are they? Earth, air, fire, water. What? Yes, I'll give it to you right now. According to the Samkhya doctrine, the world of objects has the perceptions of the five tanmatras, roughly subtle elements: touch, hearing, sight, taste, smell. And each of these are perceived by something that corresponds to it. And what do we call these five elements of the physical world? They're described as akshas, which means ether; vaya, which means air; agni, which means fire; ap, which means water; and Prithvi, which means earth. Wow, look at that. What a coincidence. They have the exact same elements. And what I find is even more interesting is they understand them in the exact same ways. Don't tell me there's no connection with these ideas. Are you seeing this? It's a big deal. And of course, Empedocles talks about the idea of the fall of humanity. But he says, but guess what? We'll be coming back because Empedocles says we have past births. What? Empedocles, who's Greek, says we have past births. We're plants, we're animals, a boy and a girl, right? He goes on, right? You know, we continue. And we are born, we die, and then we're reborn and we live again, according to Empedocles. This is a Greek philosopher, not a Shermana, but there you have it. He goes into reincarnation. And then, of course, you have Pythagoras, right? Pythagoras, well, he traveled everywhere too. He believed in reincarnation. He said, he believed that we started out, maybe, you know, we could be a vegetable, we could be a body, we could be an animal, anything, right? In fact, he said one time he was upset because he thought that the barking of a dog sounded like one of his friends. And he said that dog was probably reincarnated for my friend, Pythagoras. And also, he also believed, according to Aelius Gillius, that one of his lives, he was a beautiful courtesan. So there you have it, right? Pythagoras taught the idea of what's called the wheel of birth. Does this sound familiar? Mm-hmm. The wheel of birth, wait a minute. That's samsara, right? You know, birth, life, death, rebirth. He's teaching the same idea. But guess what? For him, you got to do good actions in order to be liberated after a series of lifetimes. Wait, that's Hinduism. He's spouting out their whole idea. He says, well, what do I do? Well, he says, well, first thing we got to do is we got to be vegetarian. What? He was a vegetarian because he says, when we eat meat, we add material to us that holds us back. Well, this is exact a Shermana idea, right? You know, and so it goes a little bit further because this idea goes into what's called the Orphic mysteries that Pythagoras is connected to. And so he talks about how some particles of the divine ether sink downward to the earth where they become clothed. Empedocles also talks about this in the strange garment of the flesh, he says. And the soul was said to be carried to and fro by the winds and drawn into the body, but through respiration. So it's the idea that there's these particles are floating about. Once we breathe it in, however, our soul is enclosed in the flesh. And then we enter what's called the circle or the wheel of generation or the circle of necessity, which of course it says a long and weary circuit of birth and death that keeps going on. But it goes, and how long are we stuck on this earth? Well, I think it's pretty interesting here. According to Empedocles and Plato, it says that we're here about thrice 10,000 seasons. Thrice 10,000 seasons. Which is, could be like, maybe some will say, well, it could be 10,000 years.
7 lifetimes.
Right. So it's probably, well, 10,000 years is a long time. Yeah, seasons, because there's 4 seasons. And, is this interesting? Right? You're going, wow, it's kind of a long time. Yeah. In fact, it's interesting. Empedocles, back to him again. He says, Eritu, I have been a boy, a girl, a bush, a bird, and a scaly fish in the sea. So don't tell me they didn't believe in reincarnation. You guys got it? They did. And this idea, of course, continues on. In the those Orphic mysteries of Pythagoras and others believe that you have to go through a purification process, purity, have to do various things to do so. We won't spend time talking about that because that goes for quite a few pages, but you get the idea. Orphism will inform Plato, and Plato will write about it, and he was a believer. And this idea of reincarnation also will continue to the Greeks and Romans, and it goes all the way to the famous writing by Virgil known as the Aeneid, where, of course, you have the story of where Aeneas, he wants to see his father, Anchises, right? And he goes into the underworld, and at the very end, His father points to that your line's going to go on. They're going to be the founders of Rome. He said, look at those drinking from the waters of Lethe, from the waters of forgetfulness. That's the future Julius Caesar. That's a future Augustus Caesar. And they're going to be coming back. These souls that have been lived will live again and continue on. And of course, Virgil's Aeneid was recommended reading for all Roman school children after the age of Augustus. So yeah, reincarnation is everywhere. So this is not, so people say, yeah, India, it's reincarnation. It's like, no, Greeks, Romans, reincarnation. Okay, so we're having fun here, right? Okay, moving right along. Wow, okay, good. Whew, we got to cover a lot of material there, right? And only on page 10. How many pages do I have? 57. Okay, but I won't ever get there, so don't worry. There's always hope, though, right? Okay, so we move on. Okay, so the Shramana's, of course, challenge the status quo, and that's of course Brahmanism. And one of the famous Shamanas, obviously, was Buddha. Mentioned by that, and of course. What I like about Buddha, I want to just stop for a few moments. He is the perfect traveling salesman. He is, because he has these four noble truths, right? And it's like, wow, the guy, if a salesman goes around and says, hey, I got four noble truths, just four leads to salvation. You're going to listen, right? Yeah, I mean, you will. Okay, four, So you get there and he says, okay, so what are they? He said, well, life is suffering. I got that. Down. What's the second one? Suffering is due to attachment. Okay, I got that one. We just got two more left. What's the next one? Attachment can be overcome. Wow, I got one more and I'm done. I'm glad I stuck around, listened to this guy, this great Shramana. So tell me, what is the fourth and last one? There is a path for achieving this. What? There's a path for achieving this. That's four. Well, what is it called? The Eightfold Path. What? 8 more? Right? But like I said, he tricked you. He hooked you, didn't he? Right? He told you only the 4, and all of a sudden, now that because good sales, right? Now that you stayed for 4, you're going to stay now for 8 more, right? It's like, okay, tell me how to do this, and of course he'll say, hey, first of all. One is you view reality as it is and not just as it appears to be. Well, what does that mean? Do you understand that, the Four Noble Truths? You go, oh, yeah, I got that. Number 2 is, do you have the intention to renounce this false life, living in freedom and harmlessness? In other words, now you understand the Four Noble Truths. Do you want to do it? And they're all, okay, we'll do it. Because like a good salesperson, he gives you a way out, right? He says, basically, hey, the first one, of the Eightfold Path, he just tells you, okay, if you don't understand it, no, I don't understand it. He'll clarify. If you really don't understand it, it's like, okay, you can go away now, right? But if you want to do it, now he's got you hooked, right? And then, of course, the next ones are pretty easy. Obviously, moving around. 3, of course, is right speech. Change the way you talk. Number 4 is right action, acting well. Number 5, of course, is obviously good livelihood. And then 6, you're moving on to, you want to make an effort to improve. Basically, you make a list in your mind. These are the good actions. These are the bad actions, kind of put that there. And then, of course, number 7 is focus on the good actions. And finally, meditation. Number 8, hey, what was that? We're done. That's the fastest Eightfold Path I ever heard. And I'm sure he didn't do it that fast. He went slowly. Does that make sense? But you see, you go, why did you go through all that? Because I want you to understand he's a Shramana. He's selling his goods and wares. So, of course, he's got to have a sales pitch. Nice. This is a sales pitch. See how it works? Sales. Now it makes more sense, doesn't it now? Right? Okay. Well, already, of course, I told you about the fact that Alexander the Great, he got there. Now we're back to Alexander again. He got to he's there. He's sitting there at the Indus River. And there's some funny stories. I wish I could tell you some. Okay, I'll tell you one. One of the stories is that Alexander captured 10 gymnosophists. I'm actually reading the primary source. These philosophers were required to be clever, be concise in answering questions. And Alexander therefore put difficult questions to them, declaring that he would put to death him who first made an incorrect answer. He will put to death him who first made an incorrect answer. Remember that part, okay? And then the rest, in order determined in like manner. So the first one, accordingly, being asked, which in his opinion were more numerous, the living or the dead? And this Gymnosophist said, the living were, since the dead no longer exist. It's a good answer. Okay. The second being asked whether the earth or the sea produced larger animals, said the earth did, since the sea was part of the earth. Okay. The third being asked what animal was the most cunning, said that which is up to this time man has not discovered. I like that, right? Man hasn't discovered it. That's the most cunning animal. Get away from humanity, hunting, right? The fourth, when asked why he had induced Sabas to revolt, replied, because I wished him either to live nobly or to die nobly. The fifth being asked which in his opinion was older, day or night, replied, day by 1 day. And he added, upon the king expressing amazement, that hard questions must have hard answers. Passing on then to the sixth, Alexander asked how a man could be most loved. If, said the philosopher, he is most powerful and yet does not inspire fear. Isn't that good? Most powerful but does not inspire fear. Of the three remaining, he who was asked how one might become a god instead of a man replied, by doing something which a man cannot do. The one who was asked which was stronger, life or death, answered life, since it supports so many ills. And the last, there he goes, asked how long it were well for a man to live. How long it were well for a man to live, answered, until he does not regard death as better than life. So then turning to the judge, remember, Alexander bade him give his opinion. The judge declared that they had answered one worse than the other. Well then, said Alexander, you shall die first for giving such a verdict. He's all, that cannot be, O king. Said the judge, unless you falsely said that you would put to death first him who answered worst. Really good? Isn't great? I love it. It's like, okay. It's like, and he let them all, of course. He said, okay. And he dismissed them with gifts. So this is the encounter of somebody who's Macedonian with the Greeks with India. Does that make sense? Isn't that cool? So I'm reading you an exchange, and there's so many of them. He meets others too, Gymnosophists. And I'm reading this, another one called Dandamus, of course. What I think about this one is, it's interesting, is Alexander, the great son of Zeus, has ordered him to come to him. He will give you gold and other rewards, but if you refuse, he may behead you. When Dandamus heard that, he did not even raise his head and replied, lying in his bed of leaves, God, the great king, is not a source of violence, but provider of water, food, light, and life. Your king cannot be God, who loves violence and who is mortal. Even if you take away my head, you cannot take away my soul, which will depart to my God and leave this body like we throw away old garments. We Brahmin do not love gold nor fear death, so your king has nothing to offer which I may need. Go tell your king, therefore, I will not come to you. If he needs me, he must come to me. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, strong-willed. And so we have quite a few. One of them, named Kalanos, became a friend of them, kind of traveled along with them. He also refused gifts as well. And then Calamus, he returned back to Babylon with them, and he's not feeling very well. And so he burned himself alive. And this was a very common practice amongst the Gymnosophists. Okay, so there's other little stories here, but okay, here. While in Gandhara, of course, there's all these stories that Dionysus was an early founder. I'll skip that. Oh, it's interesting though. There is a story that goes about that in the Himalayas live a whole tribe of whose feet are turned front to back They run very fast, but cannot breathe in any other climate, and they are monsters. And this is the origin of the abominable snowman stories. It starts all the way here with Alexander the Great. I thought that's kind of a fascinating little tidbit, right? Okay, well, you're going, well, okay, that's great. Alexander the Great, he met, people from India. He goes home. That's it, right? No, they law came with them, and we also have a person who's a philosopher that went there especially to study the Brahmins. What? Like an anthropologist. What's his name? His name is Pharaoh. So he lived from 360 to 270. He studied with the Magi, then he studied with the Gymnosophists. And he was a very serious guy. And then he went home and he taught his ideas to Timon of Philius. And then, of course, that was then taught by Sextus Empiritus. And this is a philosophy that comes from India that then gets taught in Greece. What? Well, that's pretty direct. You want me to tell you about the philosophy that got taught? Yeah, why not? Okay. Is this fun? Yeah, right? You heard things you'd never hear? Okay. It's called Pharaohonians. And he says that people can be divided into those who are known as aphatic, which those who, when you listen to something, it's a suspension of judgment. Zetetic, those people are engaged in seeking, like you guys, right? And aporetic, engaged in refutation. All they're thinking about is refuting everything. You got it? So you got those people who basically just don't, hey, you know what? You get those all the time today, right? I don't want to make it, I don't want to make a decision. Like I said, I'll suspend, my opinion. You have others that go, tell me more. And others that go, I'm getting ready. Right? So, but what does he say? He says, well, it's important that since we can't prove reality ever, it's always subjective, that we always need to be in an attitude of intellectual suspense because nothing is really real. And he says, as a result, orthodoxia, we have freedom from worry. Don't worry about anything. Just be happy. He also says, you ask three questions. First, we must ask what things are and how they're constituted. Second, we ask how we are related to these things. Third, we ask what ought to be our attitude towards them. Pharaoh answered was that things are indistinguishable, unmeasurable, unpredictable, and no more than that or both. He concluded that human senses neither transmit truths nor lies. So he is really, once again, you can see how these ideas are coming from India and going right into Greece. Okay, so you're thinking, okay, so we're done, Dr. Rietveld. That's about it, right? No. What? I hate to tell you this. We're not even the tip of the iceberg, but I'll make sure I give you a lot of good stuff and maybe wrap up things quickly towards the end because I want to make sure you get some highlights, but I don't want to rush it too much. So I'll continue my same pace as it is right now. I want you to understand things fully too. So we have here Alexander the Great. He rise in 326. By the time you get to the year 322, there's an empire on the other side of the Indus River. What happened? Well, what happened is this. 4 years later, India is like, we don't want him coming over again. We're going to unite. And that's the Marion Empire. Isn't that fascinating? So you get Indian unity because of the Greeks. There were warring factions before that time, but once that happened, it's like, we're all together and we're strong and powerful. And so it was held under Chandragupta Maurya. Holds the power. And he's also known as Atrachatis by the Greeks. And of course, you have this great empire. What happens is that, is that they fight back the Greeks. And for a little while, the Greeks were pushed back a little bit, pushed out of Western Punjab around 317. And then some of the Greek colonies were forced to leave in 316. And you're thinking, okay, so that's the end now. The Marion Empire that's pushing them back. And here comes, wait, there was just a period of time of disorientation because, Alexander the Great died. What do? But all of a sudden, you have a large section of his empire under the Seleucids, the Hellenistic Empire. And as a result, here comes Seleucus the First, Nicator. He arrives to the scene and he conquers the Punjab, and he gets back to the Indus River. And now it's under the Greeks again. But more importantly, very important, he conquers and holds a place called Bactria. Bactria is Afghanistan. And a whole bunch of Greeks moved to Afghanistan. A whole bunch. Building Greek cities and bringing the Greek language and art and architecture. This is why the Museum of Kabul was so important, because it's filled with what? Hellenistic antiquities. It's Greek stuff. Isn't that fascinating? And the Greeks, yes, intermarried with those in Afghanistan. So many in Afghanistan today have Greek blood flowing through their veins. Is this interesting? This is a twist. And they're there for a while. More than 100 years? More than 100 years. 200 years? A little longer than that too. Wow. Is this fascinating? Okay, so that's the beginning, right? Okay, so Seleucids take over quite a bit of areas, right? Now, what happens is Seleucus does lose the Gandhara region. He still holds the other regions, but he loses it to Chandragupta, but it's kind of an exchange because Chandragupta marries his daughter, and he gets also 500 war elephants. So wait a second, you have mixing. Of course, you have a bunch of mixing going on, and of course, I have a whole bunch of stories about elephants, but I won't go there. So Chandragupta locates a new capital called Pataliputra. It had around 300,000 people. It was the largest city in the world at that time. The Marion Empire. By the way, the city was a gigantic parallelogram. It was 1.5 miles wide, but 9 miles long. So pretty long, right? This is pretty amazing. It had 64 gates. It had gardens and parks and temples, and they had a very efficient bureaucracy. They had libraries. They had a giant public works, and best of all, they even had a welfare system. And that welfare system took care of the poor and needy. Isn't that fascinating? But Chandragupta, about that, is that somebody arrived to Marion Empire. Who? A Greek. What's his name? Megasthenes. He's a Greek historian. Wait. A Greek historian goes to India, stays in India, and writes about Indian history. You're going, this is a big deal. Do we have his writings? We have large portions of his writings, and it goes on for pages here. Is that amazing? So now you have a Greek historian writing about Indian history in India, right? Again, are you getting the point? There are other connections. You can see that already, right? Megasthenes. A lot of this was preserved by various writers, including Arian. I want to mention, though, he traveled quite a bit. He went as far north, according to him, as the Himalayas. He was as far south as Ceylon, went to Sri Lanka. So he saw South India, he saw Central India, he saw quite a bit, right? And he talks about various stories and legends. And one interesting one, which has amazed people, Megasthenes says that in all, beyond the Marion Empire, there's 118 Indian nations. 118, the rest is fragmented. And he talks about, so interesting, he talks about that ancient times. He said these Indians in this area were nomads, and they came from Scythia, and they came on wagons, and they wore various skins, and they were. It's like, you're going, why is that important? Because Scythia is the area of the Caucasus Mountains. He's describing the migration of the Indo-Europeans, and that memory was still alive and well during the 200s BCE. Isn't that amazing? And that happened when? Well, that happened the migration happened between 2,000 to 1,500 years. And Megasthenes is recording it later on. So to me, that's amazing. He talks, of course, about, Indian kings and leaders. He talks about, let's see here. He talks about how women we are betrothed at 7 years old, typically. He talks about that people prefer to ride elephants or for the wealthy. The next, are horse chariots. Next or third are camels. And finally, horseback, because nobody wants to ride on horseback. It has to be the first three are big. He talks a lot about elephants. He talks about chronology. He talks about Indians and their beliefs of death. This also said that the Indians do not construct monuments for the dead, for they think that the virtues of men are sufficient to perpetuate their memory after their death, as well as the songs which they sing in their honor. He also makes an overview of the cities. He describes what they look like. He mentions that the cities by the sea are usually made out of wood. He mentions the ones up in the hills are made of stone. He describes them. He describes Pataputra. And then he goes on. He talks about how you trap an elephant, which is pretty fascinating. What you do is you dig a big ditch. You dig a big hole, and then a ditch around that, and then you build a bridge, and you put female elephants in. And then you cover it over, and the male elephant you want to capture is attracted to the female elephants. Because elephants are social creatures. And so then once it crosses the bridge, you remove the bridge, and ta-da, you got an elephant. So we all know that male elephants love female elephants, so there you have it. It goes into tigers. These are exciting things for Megasthenes. Tigers and bears. Tigers. He talks about ants. Indian ants are so big, so strange. He talks about parrots, and he's amazed because guess what? Parrots utter speech. They actually say what you say back to you, which is amazing. I know for us we're going, but for this Greek, this is a big deal. Monkeys are fun, right? Always monkeys. He talked about how Indians like to dye their beard different colors. I think that's interesting. And then he talks about the caste system. He talks about the caste system, yet the caste system is a little different and has scholars confused. Because the caste system, as we know, is Brahmin. These are the priests. Kshatriya, these are the warriors and officials. Vaishya, these are the merchants, artisans. And the Shudra are the peasants and laborers. And finally, of course, you have the non-caste, those are the outcasts, the least. Megasthenes states that first are the collective body of the philosophers, he calls them. And he says, not inferior to any other caste. Well, okay, that makes sense. Philosopher kind of connects with the Brahmin. You can see that right away. Then he mentions the next caste is the husbandmen. Husbandmen, they devote the whole time to the village. They work the land, do no harm. That sounds a lot like the Shudras, right? So you have that one. The third caste is the shepherds, which is fascinating. And the fourth is the artisans. Okay, the Vaishya, right? You can see that, artisans, right? And then, of course, the fifth are the military. And then it goes into the sixth. You have the overseers. And finally, you have the counselors and the assessors. And you're going, well, this doesn't make any sense. How can you have 7 castes? Well, if you take a look and you really think about it, you realize that that actually what happens is that many of those who are the Kshatriya kind of take up 2 of the other castes. So you can see that at this point in time, the caste system could be a 7, or it could be a localized version. What I'm excited about is the fact that here's a Greek talking about the caste system, right? Who would ever expect or who would ever know, right? By the way, he goes on for lots of pages about the details of each caste, exactly what they do, purification rites, you name it, page after page, and I can't tell you it all, but just know there's a lot here. Okay, so moving right along. Okay, so what will happen is after this, You have Bimbasara as the next leader at the Chandragupta. And of course, he has a trade with Antiochus I, who is the Seleucid Greek. The first one, Chandragupta, was Jain. This one was Hindu in belief system. Finally, of course, I wish I could talk about Ashoka forever, but I gotta mention him. Ashoka of the Marion Empire. And I want to mention what he did is he set up all over his empire these great cream-colored sandstone pillars. And they're surmounted by bell-shaped capitals. They have an image of a roaring lion, and it looks very Persian in style. So you already see the accumulation of various ideas. But on these, by the way, some of these weigh as much as 40 tons, and they're all from the same area, same quarry. What I want to mention is that they are, oh, there's one that's 50 tons, sorry, they're located everywhere from what is now Afghanistan all the way to what is now as Bangladesh. They're spread out, and they are in different languages. And one of the languages they're in is Greek. Yes, Greek. Why? Because the Greeks got to understand it. They got to be able to read it. So in the areas where the Greeks live, so it is. So he talks about various things. I don't want to read them all, but I do want to read just a few. In terms of medical treatment, Ashoka believed in equality for both people and animals. He states, everywhere within beloved of the gods, King Bhayadasa's domain, and among the people beyond the borders, the Cholas, the Pandyas, the Satraputras, the Kalaputras, as far as Tanrapi, and where the Greek king Antiochus rules. This is his inscription. And among the kings who are neighbors of Antiochus, everywhere has beloved of the gods, King Bhayadasa, made provision for two types of medical treatment. Medical treatment for humans and medical treatment for animals. Wherever medical herbs, suitable for humans or animals are not available, I've had them imported and grown. Wherever medical roots or fruits are not available, I've had them imported and grown. Along roads, I have wells dug and trees planted for the benefit of humans and animals. So you have veterinary medicine. He wanted to be bothered at all different times. It didn't matter to him. First and foremost was duty, but also because of his connection to all different belief systems. All across the, remember right now, you got the crossroads. You got these trade routes going through the Marion Empire to China on one side and Southeast Asia, and the other side, Persia and Greece, and of course, obviously, Italy, Rome later on. You have, there's so many interactions, he basically got to the point of, can't we all just get along when it comes to religion? And I'm going to go ahead and read this quickly, and then we'll keep going. But I want to make sure you understand this. King Bhayadasa honors both ascetics and householders of all religions, and he honors them with gifts and honors of various kinds. But beloved of the gods, King Bhayadasa does not value gifts and honors as much as he values this, that there should be growth in the essentials of all religions. Growth in essentials can be done in different ways, but all of them have as their root restraint speech, that is, not praising one's own religion or condemning the religion of others without good cause. And if there is cause for criticism, it should be done in a mild way. But it is better to honor other religions for this reason. By so doing, one's own religion benefits, and so do other religions, while doing otherwise harms one's own religion and the religion of others. Whoever praises his own religion due to excessive devotion and condemns others with the thought, let me glorify my own religion, only harms his own religion. Therefore, contact between religions is good. One should listen to and respect the doctrine professed by others. Beloved of the gods, King Bhayadasa desires that all should be well learned in the good doctrines of other religions. What do you think of that? So as a result of connecting to all these ideas, he's saying, can't we all just get along and learn about different beliefs and ideas? Okay, so what happens under him, I won't go too much into detail, but it is important, is you're going to have the definition of two forms of Buddhism arrive. And we do have to talk about one of them, because one of them is going to be influenced by the Greeks. What? Yes, that's why we have to talk about it. So there's two forms. He had the third Buddhist council, which is called, one group is called the Star Theravada. They will become the Theravada later on. And the other is called the Mahasamgika, which will be the Mahayana Buddhism later on. And what happens, what wins the day is the Star Theravada, which becomes Theravada Buddhism. And this Buddhism spreads, Buddhist missionaries spread these ideas to South India, to Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka, and on to Southeast Asia. Well, that's Theravada. And a few of them go over to Afghanistan, which is interesting. Then what happens to the other? Well, they were not approved. But the interesting about Theravada, or I should say about Theravada Buddhism, is it's very exclusivistic, it's very individualistic, it's the idea of the perfected arhat, the perfected disciple. The thought is that we don't want to have even the slightest residue. We believe in a complete extinction. We will cease to exist completely. That is the goal after the going through samsara, life, death, rebirth, through all the various lifetimes. We want to cease to exist. We want to have the complete end of suffering. And Buddha, even, he doesn't exist anymore. And as a result, what will happen is whenever they had images of Buddha, they would have a footprint or a handprint, but nothing else when it comes to the art. Because he is gone. He left an imprint and he's gone. There's no artwork of him at first. Well, when it comes to what will become Mahayana Buddhism, Ashoka did a mistake. He accidentally did something. He's supporting the other viewpoint, but what he does is he accidentally supports the other one by creating a particular image known as a stupa. What happens is this, he said, oh, we should honor wherever Buddha did his speeches, honor his bones. But wait a second, I thought he doesn't exist anymore, right? And they start looking at these as holy places. And these basically these stupas, they're monumental pieces of architecture covered, or like mountains, covered by plaster or brick. And on top, of course, you got those three umbrellas right on top of them, right? So Buddha, the law and the Sangha, right? And then, of course, that umbrella also is the sacred tree. It's a cosmic center of the universe. And it becomes a pilgrimage spot where people on their way will stop there and they'll get a free tour. They'll see all the various images of Buddha and his story, just like looking at stained glass windows. You get the whole tour. You go around and you get a free bath and you get a free meal and you get a place to stay for the night. And maybe you'll end up being a Buddhist as a result. These are pretty cool. So everybody, trade routes, that's why we're talking about trade routes. If everybody who's on the trade route knows a good place to eat, right? It's like the police officers know the best places to eat because they're always on cruise, right? They know where the good places are because they want to spend their time at something that tastes good. It's the same thing, great meals to be had. And so what happens is the indoctrination of religion and Buddhism spreads as a result, and it's a popular form that does not honor, not arhats, the special individualistic arhats who are, go about like a lone rhinoceros, right? Through the jungle on their own, right? What they are instead are believe in the Bodhisattva, those who enter Buddhahood, as opposed to entering into nirvana. They go, hey, wait a second, we're going to stay behind and help everybody up. So and our good deeds, our karma, we can transfer over to you and bring you out. And so you're having this idea, right? Now all of a sudden something changes, it shifts. What do you mean? What happens now is Buddha becomes important in the West and the Gandhara region. And so now, since he's becoming so important, what are we going to do in Bactria too? Well, now he needs to have an image. And so suddenly you're going to have these images of Buddha starting out in the Gandhara region, as well as Bactria, as Afghanistan. That's where it starts. Is that fascinating? Isn't it interesting, right? It starts there. And then Buddha, he looks kind of thin.
Yeah.
So it's a skinny Buddha. It's not a fat Buddha. It doesn't look like me. From my belly, there's good luck, by the way. So you get some merit there. Okay, so moving right along. But what happens, though, however, having said that, is that slowly but surely, these ideas start to go east again. And as it goes east, it heads towards China. What happens is that because Buddha looks like he's wearing kind of a a toga that kind of goes across. It starts to slowly slip down, and it gets bigger and bigger as it slips down. Does that make sense? And by the time you get to China, it's like a diaper, right? And you see in art is something that happens ever so gradually. Right? So there you have that. Okay. Well, I have here the entire history of Bactria. I want to make sure that we get to all the goodies because, I haven't scraped the very edge of things, but I want to make sure that we cover everything at least. Is that okay? So let's hit some highlights. Wow. Okay, so where are we here? Okay, so highlights. Okay. Okay, so what happens is that you are going to have also a relationship with the Ptolemies of Egypt and India. Ptolemy the first sent Dionysus to the capital of the Marion Empire, Pataliputra. I had an audience before the Emperor Ashoka. Ashoka sent an ambassador back to Ptolemy in hopes that he's going to convert him to Buddhism. It didn't happen in Egypt, but there was a thought there, right? A guy by the name of Eratosthenes, he happened to be one of the librarians of Alexandria. He made a map, and this map is included not only Bactria, but the entire Indian subcontinent, complete with names of places and Ceylon. And that was, of course, created in the 200s. The Ptolemies then traded with India, various Red Sea ports. And let's talk about Bactria. The Bactrians, they were called Indo-Greeks. And they expanded into, what happens is that there's a period of time, it's pretty funny, when the Marion Empire, it becomes stronger, it's kind of pushing the Seleucids back, and the Seleucids are starting to lose, and then all of a sudden Bactria comes in, and Bactria, who are Indo-Greeks anyway, they sweep down and go to the Indus River. So basically you can replace Greeks with Indo-Greeks. It's like, okay, they even go and they attack Pataliputra. And there's and of course the various, we have writings about their attack on Pataliputra, and they're calling them vile Greeks. Isn't that fascinating? So there you have it. They are Greeks. Bactria had over 1,000 cities. One was known as Kanoon. This city is located between Russia and Afghanistan today. It's a Greek city complete with a gymnasium, Haroun, Greek-style temples and colonnades. Things are written in Greek verse. This is Afghanistan, for heaven's sakes. Who do they worship? Zeus, Hermes, and the goddess Cybele. And Bactria also had really good soil at that time, right? You're going to have, by the way, the person who expanded into India, his name is Euthydemus. They all have these really good Greek names, all of them, right? And then, of course, you're going to have others known as Menander, and he embraced Buddhism and became a monk later on. Then what they did is they adopted the Greek coinage system with heads and tails, and they look like Greek coinage. That Greek, it's even weighted the same as the Attic weights. So it's the same in many ways when it comes to the metals that are in the coins. They're the same as they were in Athens, in Greece itself. What I find is so interesting is that at this point, India adopts coinage, the rest of India, and they adopt the Attic kind with heads and tails. So if you go to India, you're looking for loose change, that's the Greek coins that they'll be using with the images of their local kings. And is that funny? It's funny, it's fun. But meanwhile, you're going to have an interesting situation where I talked about Buddha. Oh boy, this is always fun. So Buddha, he is in the Mahayana Buddhism. He becomes more and more important as far as an image is concerned, and they decide that he, in a sense, is a savior figure. He is Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha. The very first time that Buddha is understood as Lord Buddha is from a stupa from the Gandhara region from the 1st century BCE. And what's the name of the person who dedicated this first evidence? He was the governor, and his name was Theodorus. What? The very first time you have Lord Buddha, the Savior Buddha, Amida Buddha, which is very popular in Japan, in Korea. Are you guys getting it? The very first time it's ever used was by a Greek in an inscription. What do you think? So what happens is in the Gandhara region, and many scholars have focused on this, many different belief systems, including even Greek ideas, Greek mystery cults and all these other ideas, the Celtic cults, were all mixing together, and it actually influenced directly Mahayana Buddhism. And that's the Buddhism that spread to China and to, I know this is pretty revolutionary, isn't it? India, China and Japan and Korea. Do you have more evidence? Yeah, I got about 6 pages just on that. Is that good? Right? So, and then of course we have another area, and that is Indian astrology. Indian astrology at first, had their own system between 1400 to 1200 BCE. Then, calculations and movement of both the sun and the moon within a 5-year cycle. But then what happens is that the Greeks bring in their astrology. And the work is called the Yavna. Well, Yavna means like Greek in Sanskrit. The Yavna, which is the earliest astrological text in Sanskrit. What does it mean in Sanskrit? It means the sane of the Greeks. What? So the system which influences Indian astrology is called the sanes of the Greeks. Dr. Rietveld, is there a connection? It's called the sanes of the Greeks. And it's translated from Greek into Sanskrit. So the answer is, I think, kind of, right? And it's funny because the alternative idea is the Deccan system, which the Greeks, the 10th system, which is another way of reading the zodiac. And the Greeks did have that as well, but they got that from the Egyptians. So we're still stuck. So the zodiac, you got the Egyptian influence, or you got the Greek influence. Either way, you got influence. Well, the sea routes are spreading about. I kind of skipped a few sections here. Oh yeah, this is of the Kushan Empire. Oh, I want to talk about this too. Yeah. All right. I got to mention the Kushan Empire because I can't not mention it. The Marion Empire, of course, fell, and you have these others that kind of fill the place. And a guy named King Kaneshka, he followed the Ashoka's footsteps of the Kushan Empire, and he also was the one who embraced much of Greco-Roman art. So much of Greco-Roman art mixes with Kushan art, and it's pretty obvious in various styles, including the style of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the Yakshis, the Yakshas, and also what happens is that they decide to use Greek not only as their official language, but they use the Greek script for their own language. So the Kushan Empire during this period of time, but they had to invent an extra letter because they didn't have all of them. So they invented what's kind of a sh sound to the Greek alphabet. So they added an extra one. Otherwise, it was the same. So wait, and also the coinage. He adopted the same coinage that we got from Bactria, we got from the Greeks. They had the same kind of coinage. And what I think is interesting is I'm reading the coinage here, and they mention on the coinage Serapis, Helios, Hephaestus, Selene, Animos. Wait, they're mentioning what? Wait, this is northern India. This is the area, the Kushans are the area, in the 2nd century CE. This is the area of the Marion Empire, and they have in their coinage these Greek deities that everybody's using. What does that mean? That means that they're connecting to these Greek deities. There's people worshiping these Greek deities. Is this interesting? So you got the Greek language being, but what he did though is he said enough and enough. let's stop using Greek all the time. We'll just use your letters. It's like, and so that was used for centuries after that. All right, now sea routes, constantly to India. So what happens is that the Ptolemies had figured this out. The sea routes in 40 CE, the Romans also began to go directly to India. In fact, you had as many as recorded 20, thank you, 20 voyages by the Romans to India each year. 20. And that's from one port to another, not naming some of the other ports. Is that a lot? Yeah, and there's more through land traffic and so forth. So the Shermanas also start crossing over. Shermanas appeared before a guy by the name of Augustus Caesar, maybe you heard of him before, and then he burned himself alive because that's just what they do. You know. You have another Shermana, actually a person who converts over to be a Shermana. His name is Proteus Peregrinus, as recorded by Lucian de Samosata. He was first in the mystery religions, and then he became a Christian, and then he decided to embrace the Indic philosophy, and he burned himself alive in the year 165 at the Olympic Games before everybody, and everybody knew about it, and we have many records of it from all these different perspectives. Isn't that interesting? So yeah, not low key at all. Christianity in India, quite a bit, right? Christianity appears, some people say it's the Thomas school that arrived there. You have works that take place at the Acts of Thomas, takes place in India. Clement of Alexandria says that a group of early Christians were preceded by Indian ascetics, and they're called the Inkratia, which are the abstainers. And the Inkratia movement that Clement of Alexandria talks about was at first, it came from India, it was mimicked by Christians, this gets better, and then Inkratia movement goes to Egypt and informs and influences the monasticism in Egypt. And so there is a direct connection between Indian asceticism and monastic movements in Egypt. Is that fascinating? You want a connection? How's that one? Who says so? A Greek, Clement of Alexandria, who lives in Alexandria. I think you should know. But then again, his father, the head of his school, his name is Pantanaeus. According to Pantanaeus, the person at the head of his school before him went to India. He went to India, wrote all about it. In fact, if you take a look at the ideas of Clement of Alexandria, his ideas of asceticism, his ideas about connecting to the other, you will sense all over ideas that connect directly to India. So Indian ideas go to Clement of Alexandria. It goes to a guy by the name of Origen, who was, of course, followed after. So you basically, the Peripatetic school, so the school of Clement of Alexandria starts with, of course, the guy I just mentioned. My brain's getting tired. And then Clement of Alexandria, and after that, Origen, he takes these ideas and he embraces it and brings this into Eastern Orthodox theology. But Origen does one thing that's interesting, and that he talks about the idea of reincarnation. Origen, who's a Christian, talks about that. Yeah, because he said that God's love is irresistible. There's no way you could ever resist it. It's impossible. So if you resist it in this lifetime, you won't be able to resist it in the next one, or you'll be growing closer and closer with each successive lifetime until finally you become one with God. And he says even Satan himself will be saved someday, eventually, because you have the idea of the falling of the spirits and the reuniting with them. Because if God is love, if God is infinite, then therefore the infinite love of God has to be irresistible. Isn't that fascinating? It brings in against Indian ideas. Oh, Origen. Well, you're thinking, okay, well, that's fun. Well, it's funny because Origen was also a student of a certain Ammonius Saccas of Alexandria. Ammonius Saccas, yeah. Ammonius Saccas, who, by the way, according to the ancient Greeks who lived in Alexandria, Saccas is a Greek transliteration of the word Sakyas, which is a ruling clan in India. And according to Gautama Buddha, and according to the Greeks, he taught not just Greek philosophy, he taught the Indic philosophy. Why is that important? Well, Ammonius Saccas is the founder of Neoplatonism. He taught Plotinus everything he knows. Neoplatonism, but that influences Christianity. That influences. Oh, stop, Dr. Rietveld. This is too much. Are you guys getting this? There's too much. You know, I still haven't even touched the surface. I skipped so much. 57 pages. I think I read about 15 of them. And we have so much information on the connection between the Mediterranean and India to the point where everybody knows this. This is common knowledge. People from India are always walking by your front door. They're just part of, because the Romans also later on, the Greeks started it, the Hellenistic empires, but the Romans really started this cosmopolitan society where you just have people from all over going about. And you had certain sections of towns that are filled with people from India and other parts from Persia, and they're bringing their ideas. And as far as the connection between East and West, do you kind of see how India influenced the West? You see also how the West influenced India. And it goes both ways. So when people become exclusivistic and they think that Christianity grew up in isolation, which is, Judaism there, I just kind of roll my eyes. But I mean fair. When people say that the Mahayana Buddhism grew up only within the Eastern context, I say, what about the Gandhara region? What about the mixtures of the people and the philosophies and the ideas on that very rich soil that was heavily cultivated, right? And then, of course, you got these Bactrians, you got Afghanistan and their ideas, right? So you've had these Indic Greeks in those places. So the Greeks were everywhere. The Greeks got all the way to China. That's a whole other story. Chinese got all the way to Rome. It's a small world after all, without all the strange little scary characters going back and forth and singing yourself in this chanting style that will drive you crazy. The idea is it is a small world after all. And the problem with today is that we see everything all sectioned up. We see everything compartmentalized. And when we talked about those value ideas, remember we talked about that? All those ideas are in place, right? Sure, there's superficial adoption, but there's others that believe and take on these concepts, hook, line, and sinker. Hello, the idea of Buddha as a savior figure, right? That doesn't come from Theravada, this Theravada, right, movement. That comes Mahagika, but it actually more comes from the Gandhara region. And we have a source. We know when it starts. It starts in the 1st century BCE, and it's amongst those who are mixed with the Greek population, for heaven's sakes. So yes, there's a connection, but there's even more. But that's for another time. But I hope that this talk has invigorated you, has given you a sense of curiosity. And also, I hope that you go ahead and research this yourself, because the problem is that people are not spending time reading these materials to even find them in the first place. We are depending too much on people saying one thing or the other. And I'll tell you this, I'm going to conclude with this, is I will not rest until this story will change. And that is this. Alexander the Great, he got to India, he got to the Indus River, and he turned around, and that was it. That was not it. Thank you. There we go. I'll get people. Maybe I should get everybody together instead. They're all spread out. So, questions?
Okay. So the naked philosophers wandering around. Why were they naked?
To show that they do not cling to material things, material comforts, nor the weather. Rain or shine. They don't let, being cold or hot, it didn't matter to them, because the body was illusion. It's Maya. The only reality is the Atman. The only reality is the soul. And they're showing the negation of the physical realm by showing themselves naked.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess this is corollary to Margie's question. We talked lots of stuff about the rarefied philosophical, but I was basically kind of curious if they had all these roads interconnecting.
Yeah.
This is for the purposes of trade and commerce.
Oh, yeah.
So what is it that was being traded?
Okay.
It would be stuff that would be specific to the various places.
Yeah. Well, the ancients put together gigantic lists. One thing that was used as a medium of exchange, you didn't read this, happened to be pearls from off the coast of India. That was really popular as a medium of exchange. And the Greeks and Romans wanted those pearls. Another, of course, commodity is ivory. It's another one. Nutmeg is a big one. Cinnamon is another one. So you're going to have saffron is another one.
What do they want from the West?
What do they want from the West? They want, sometimes when it comes to raw materials, you're going to have, of course, gold or silver, or especially a big one, a huge one they want is tin. Tin is a big one. Tin is not available in certain areas of India, but it is available around Bactria. So the tin trade is a big deal because that's important for bronze and other kinds of metal alloys. So that's an important thing. So they wanted that from the West. Also for the West, you have animal commodities, and by the way, saffron is big in the eastern section of the Mediterranean. So I mean, not everybody has the same kinds of spices. So Western spices were wanted, and then of course Eastern spices were wanted, and so there's an exchange even of that as well. Yeah. So lots of goods. By the way, one thing I didn't mention, and this is fascinating, according to the ancients, even though they had a caste system in India, one thing they keep mentioning is they didn't have slavery. Did not have slavery. They had a caste system. I guess that was bad enough as it is, right? Especially if you're a Shudra or untouchable, but they did not have slavery. And the Romans were like, hey, nobody owns each other. This is interesting. Yeah. Another question.
Okay, so when you spoke about the Greek influence on Indian astrology, you said a word that meant the sayings of the Greek in Sanskrit. What was that word?
Oh, good. All right. So that word is Yavana Jataka. I'll spell it right here. It is spelled Y-A-V-A-N-A. Yavana means Greek. J-A-T-A-K-A, which means writings. There you go. So you can look it up and look into it and explore it. Another question.
With all the constant exchange of philosophies and ideas and religion, was there any areas where it created conflict with various religions, or did they just fuse together at certain points? So in some instances they were polytheistic and polypluralism. So like, was there more fusions or was there more conflict?
There were more fusions, which I think is fascinating. Yeah, more fusions going on than anything else. We see that influence. Something else that's interesting is you look at the Asceticism in Cretatic, you see the influence of Indian ideas even within that particular work. So Christianity, which would be so exclusivistic in so many different ways, is still taking up and absorbing these ideas. And many of these ideas, the Asceticism, this asceticism, was also part of these monastic movements. So monasticism definitely has some Eastern influences. Who says so? The early Christians do. So I guess they're a good source. Why not? You know? Is that helpful? Clement of Alexandria, of course, is one. Pantanius is another. This is fascinating. So yeah, another question.
Yes, you said you had 50 pages of lecture.
57.
And 57, and you didn't get to all of it. Is it available somewhere?
No.
Okay.
It isn't. It isn't. But
What do you have something that you can recommend where if people want to go out and research?
I don't.
Ah,
But I have an outline of it.
Okay,
And maybe I can make that available.
okay,
So
I think,
outline of my talk.
okay,
And it's only 7 pages long as opposed to 57.
okay.
So, and you could use this as a way to look up things.
Okay, I think that's a great idea.
So I don't know. So have the person maybe email me or send me a
Okay.
Facebook and accept it.
Jack, are you getting that?
So,
Okay.
I want to get a picture of people too.
All right.
How do we do that? Oh, just sit over there. Yeah. Yeah, keep asking questions. I don't want to interrupt you.
Any other questions from the Zoom
Want a
family
picture?
here?
You can get in front of me. You can be in part of. Okay, so I want to get, here we go. Oh, that's good. I'll get Margie too, but 1, 2, and maybe I'll do this. There we go. There we go. Oh, yeah. You worked up. No, you're too dark. We'll turn off the flash. Okay, you can do that. Turn on the light.
I have a
Brace
question.
yourself.
I'd like to know if it's really more comfortable to ride a camel than a horse.
Is it more comfortable to ride a camel?
You had the hierarchy of.
Yeah, so the top one is elephant.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to ride the elephant.
Mhm.
So that's the top one.
Well, elephants are just.
And,
cool, but-
yeah, right.
I
And,
can't imagine them fighting people and throwing them in the air.
well, yeah,
That's a-
but they have special seats that are kind of put together there, but yeah, there's always probably, anyway, then there's also, then of course, the 4 horses are okay, you know, and then the camel, and then the horse. And the reason why a camel is not only do they run pretty fast, but they're perfect fit for the desert.
Mhm.
Your horse is going to, horse is only right. A horse is going to die in the desert after a while. But the horse does not require, so the camel does not require a lot of water. And so that's it's a perfect kind of beast to cross a desert or dry area. So that help?
Do they need translators when they were dealing like,
Well,
you know? they
okay,
need meals and-
do they need translators to deal with the situation? And the answer is sometimes they did. But the problem, not the problem is, but later on, people became bilingual in those areas. As I mentioned before, Greek becomes one of the official languages. A part of India. You have these inscriptions so just like in many places of the world today, if you grew up in Belgium, right? You learn, you have Flemish and Walloon, right?
And French and German.
French, German. So you have many languages. Same thing in those cases. So people just learn how to pick up different languages, and they speak the different languages.
Because I would think the philosophy, like you mentioned, the king putting to death someone who answered wrong, like that translator better be damn good, right?
Well, yeah. No, I would think that would definitely be the case. That would be important.
Have a good night, folks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
The
much.
questions are actually found in the Hindu scripture of the Mahabharata, like word for word. You were kind of, I've heard these questions before.
Yes.
Yeah, word for word. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's
Just
good.
the Yudhishthira, yeah, to bring his brothers back.
Yes. Oh, by the way, I got one more little extra fun thing. Sanskrit has Greek words.
Mhm.
So of course, so the word for ink, Sanskrit is melon in Greek. The word pen, Sanskrit is kalamo. In Greek, it's kalamos. The word book, in Sanskrit, it's pushtaka. In Greek, it's puksinon. The word bridle, which is a horse's bit, in Sanskrit, it's kalina. In Greek is kalinas. The word center, it's interesting. Sanskrit is kendra. In Greek, it is kendron. A siege mine, which undermine a fortress. In Sanskrit, it's surunga. In Greek, it's saringa. Barbarian. We're barbarian. In Sanskrit, it's barbara. In Greek, it's barbaros. Word shell is Kambuka in Sanskrit, and it's Sambuka in Greek. Flower, it's Samita, which of course is that's the Sanskrit, and it's Semidilus is in Greek, and it goes on. You get the idea. So yeah, there's lots of loan words. What do you think? So yeah, so
For the sky god.
yeah,
In Latin, it's Deus, and it's the same in Sanskrit.
yeah.
No, we just say Deus Pitra.
Deus Pitra, which of course Sky Father.
It literally means sky.
Sky Father, right? And it's the same thing because Deus, obviously Patras, right? Obviously a pater or whatever it may be, is the same thing. And so you're gonna have the same idea. But also, to go even further, is that look what happens to the sky god. What happens to him is he's overthrown by his son, Indra, right? He grabs his leg and throws him down. Well, that's just the same as in Greek philosophy, right? You have the same fall. And then of course, there's another level where Indra it becomes seconded by the next group of gods, right? You got you got Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but you have the same thing in Greco-Roman religions. So in Roman religions, you have Greco-Roman religions, you got the three different levels of gods, and in Hinduism, you got the three different levels of gods too. Isn't that fascinating? One overthrowing the next.
Hinduism in the early stages was an oral tradition. So not every Hindu believes that Indra actually conquered the sky father, because if he did that, there'd be literally no sky.
There'd be no sky at all. Right.
So in other words, he just shifted popularity. So it could have been like when the Greco-Romans who went to India, it's like, well, you worship the fire and the thunder.
Well, yeah, and some people have put together the word Uranus and Varuna.
Yeah.
So you see that also, the solar deities.
Yeah.
And Uranus connected to the sky, and so of course you have that
And
connection
you
as well.
mentioned the god Aditi, which is still worshipped.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the infinite, shapeless.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. It's fascinating. And of course, you're going to have also so many of these ideas. I mean, we can go even into the sprites and the spirits and the yakshis and the yakshas and those connected to the elementals that go all the way to Europe and Northern Europe and elves and leprechauns and all these things. So you have connections there too. I mean, there's connections everywhere, right? And of course it's interesting because the big thing according to these sources is that if you're going to get married, you have to have a contest.
Yes, as you should.
As you should. Or if you want to reclaim somebody, you got to have a contest. Well, that idea actually goes also in the West, the idea of a contest. So yeah, or verification, right? So you're gonna, of course, you have in many cases, for example,
Ramayana and Mahabharata, all great kings who earned their wives via contest of some sort.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're gonna have that, but you have my brain is dying, so give me a few seconds here. You have the Odyssey, right? And Odysseus, at the end, he has to have a contest in order to, and it's interesting because the contest is what? It's stringing the bow. But guess what? That same story it goes into, right? Is connected to Rama, right? Because he had to string a bow as well, which he broke to get his wife, right? Which is, of course, an incarnation of Lakshmi. So he's like, whoa, what's going on there? So there's another connection. I mean, you're going to have a lot of our fairy tales also connect to India as well. So yeah, there's so much, isn't there?
Even modern Greek is in the Indian movie industry. All the love and romantic movies is by Eros Entertainment.
Yeah, Eros Entertainment. I know.
Till this day.
Yeah. Isn't this fun? So when we talk about India and the West, you got to realize that, and of course, I guess the next question people are going to ask is how come people don't investigate this or talk about this? I mean, that's another, right? And one, of course, is I open. No, so one of the reasons is that we have this isolationist viewpoint, and that's a problem. We don't like to see the fact that all of these ideas mix with other ideas. There's no such thing as a completely original idea. But we have this idea or beliefs that if our belief system, our religion is legitimate, if it's real, if it's authentic, then it has to be intrinsically unique in every way. It can't have any connection with anything else. It has to be autocathonically grown out of the ground. Otherwise, it's not special. It's not unique. That's a modern way. It's a post-industrial age way of looking at things. In the ancient times, they looked at things as that the more it has connections with other ideas, the more it shows that this must be really truth. It's just that our way is the uncorrupted way. Our way is the perfect way, but they don't deny the fact that these ideas are everywhere. I mean, hello, for heaven's sakes, you got magi who are the high priests of Zoroastrianism, portrayed as visiting Jesus. Well, why would that be? Well, it's the idea. Well, I mean, Shahrashant, this is the idea of there's a redeemer virgin character who's going to bring about the end in Zoroastrianism and say, hey, why not make this connection with this Christ figure? It makes a lot of sense. So these ideas just overlap, and it's looked at as authenticating these beliefs, not negating them. But nowadays, we want to stress the differences because we think that by its uniqueness, it makes it special, and make it if it's special, then it's genuine and it's real, and it's ridiculous because that's how people thought in those days. Hope that makes sense. But that's the problem. The other thing is archaeology. It turns out, unfortunately, the area of the Middle East has not been great for archaeology. It's okay in like for a while, like Iraq, Persia, but places like Afghanistan and Pakistan have been problematic for a long time, and that is a connection to the West and East. Does that make sense? So part of the Crossroads was off limits to many of us to study when it looks at like pottery, a progression moving through one place to the other, or looking at roads or whatever. You just can't go here, and in many cases, it's still that way to some extent. But scholars have been reaching back and back and forth between one another. And so things are better now than it was like 20 years ago. Anyway, I'm talking way too much. So any other questions?
Okay, so in the modern world, not to pick sides, but these connections all seem so hidden. Is that due to East or West influence specifically, or both?
Okay, so there was, when I was at Cal State Long Beach, now we're getting scary, right? I teach at Cal State now. Cal State Long Beach. This issue came up because it was readily known how much influence Mahayana Buddhism has with the West. But the problem is that many of the scholars from East Asia resented the fact because they saw this as Western colonial kinds of ideas that, hey, just because you have this idea doesn't mean that our idea is not unique. Does that make sense? And so this was looked at as a move that was problematic. No matter how much evidence, you can show the inscriptions, you can show the material evidence, you can talk about people talking about this connection, and you can go on forever, and it becomes a faith belief on the fact that many people who are from Japan don't like the idea that their form of Buddhism has Western influence. Does that make sense? And you're getting that. But also goes the other direction. People are unhappy with the idea that Platonism, the newer form, Middle to Neoplatonism, has influence that comes from India, because Neoplatonism goes right into our understanding of Christianity and the articulation of the Christology. So therefore, to say that this influence comes from India, some of it is problematic from a Christian standpoint. Is that making sense? So basically, it's on both sides of the equation. I guess I answered the question, right?
I think so.
And would you say, like, as I mentioned, the Mahabharata and the stories of Krishna and Buddha and things like that, both have, especially Mahayana Buddhism, as you mentioned, like the concept of Lord Buddha or as
Right.
the savior deity.
Yeah.
Similar to, I think, just believing Krishna as like the true God and things like that.
Yes.
Would you say that blatantly or indirectly influenced Christianity as well?
So I would say this. I would say that that the idea of Christ and the idea of Krishna There are so many similarities between the two. The problem is we don't know which came first. And that's the problem. The problem is
The chicken or the egg kind of
what's
thing.
chicken or egg, and the problem is the evidence comes within the same 2 centuries. So we're talking, it's really centered where we're kind of flipping a coin.
So it's really tight.
It's really tight, and it could be a direct influence. Some people have Jesus going to India. That's a real popular one. Another one though is that Jesus didn't have to go to India. He lives in Nazareth, for heaven's sakes, and Nazareth is right next to Sepphoris, which is a major Greco-Roman Jewish town, and there's a road there, and you can take that road from Sepphoris, right by Nazareth, go over to Bethshan, which is under the Sea of Galilee, and it hooks up to a road that goes straight to India. So I mean, you could have Shermanas right in his front door, but the influence can go the other way. A person who noted a connection to this was Gandhi, his autobiography, like the Servant of the Mount. Many of the ideas are very central towards ideas that are tenets that are from India. And so he himself says, this is, what's going on here, right? So, and of course, there are 3 ways of looking at this. One way is that this is, through oral tradition, these ideas are carried through the trade routes. The other is we all have, we're all humans. So we look at ideas in similar ways. So, we come up with the same ideas, even though there's no connection. And the other is a mystical connection, right? But when you think about it, right, I mean, you got the idea, I like talking about this. You got, Brahma, he creates the stuff of the universe. Sarasvati, she's the one who organizes the stuff. And Vishnu, he's the one who preserves the stuff. And then, of course, Lakshmi makes it abundant, right? And then it goes to Shiva, who destroys the stuff. And through the Shakti power, it transfers over to this energy, and it goes back to, hey, Brahma creates the stuff. And it goes around in the cycle. What's interesting, though, about Vishnu, he's the preserver, but also he's like the ultimate IT guy. What he does is that when there's a problem with the system, it's off balance, he goes into the system, he fixes it. And how does he fix it? Now, this is where you see parallels of Christianity. He'll incarnate in human flesh, just like Jesus, and be righteous and be a guide for people to follow in order to save humanity, to restore that balance. Well, that's very similar to Christianity. So, and then of course, return back again, right? So yeah, I can see a connection there in the fundamental architecture of the idea. Also, I want to add Buddhism when it comes to the Bodhisattvas, right? Same thing, the Bodhisattvas, so they're savior figures, right? So if it's not Buddha that's revered, it will be also the Bodhisattvas, who basically is a local guy, local village guy that makes good because he attained Buddhahood, right? And attaining Buddhahood, he's a great example. So, when you go to those stupas, not only do you see the life of Buddha, but you have a local Bodhisattva being depicted. What does he do? He's a savior figure. What does he do? In some cases, what he does is he's supposed to go off and be free in nirvana, and he decides that he's just going to live another life here as an example to save others through his impact, through his teaching, as well as through giving his karma, his good karma or good aspects to others so they can cross over. The other one, I like this one, is you're going to have the Bodhisattva who's on the wall. They depict him sitting on the wall, and so he died, but he's not crossing over into nirvana. He's on this wall, and he's helping people over the wall. So he died, but he's still right on the other side, helping us up. And then the other one, of course, the Bodhisattvas that have crossed completely over, but they're used as examples in prayer to them. So you have that. But, I always love looking at those people who are Mahayana Buddhists and Theravada Buddhists arguing, because, Theravada say, hey, we want complete extinction. We want to not exist. And that's our goal. And of course, the Mahayana will say, wait, you want something, you desire something? Well, guess what we do? We deny that, and we decide that we're going to renounce the idea of our attachment to nirvana itself, and we're going to stay here. How's that? And instead of the idea of Buddha, instead of the idea of wisdom, we're going to focus on karuna, right? We're going to focus on compassion, And so it's kind of like they doubled on the Theravadas, and they're going, oh, stop it.
It's like a double negative.
Right, isn't it? So anyway, sorry. So, yeah, any other questions?
Yes, that Pony Express that went from
Yes.
the Aegean Sea to China in 3 weeks.
No.
Not China?
Aegean
No.
Sea,
To
it went to
Afghanistan, right?
Persepolis, and then from there it went to the Indus River.
Okay. What time period was that in?
During the 500s, during the 400s, but that road was kept up even into the Roman period.
Okay, so it's 500 BC or
500 BC,
BC, okay.
but continued. And it happened, of course, during the time of the Axial Age. Perfect timing, right? For these ideas to cross back and forth. And it was paved road, and it had 111 postal stations from Ephesus to Persepolis, 111, spaced out a certain way. And then, of course, it continued another. We don't know how many postal stations went from Persepolis to the Indus River, but we know it was operational because it was referred to during the time of Alexander the Great. Arian mentions it as well. So it was still there. And we know it's still there because also later on, Roman historians refer to it. The Emperor Trajan followed this road when he was making his conquests in the east. Of course, he died. So it's too bad. And Hadrian mentions this. Makes this. This is a road. It's basically like the 91 freeway. Just a major road. And when it's useful, they're not going to destroy it. They'll just keep repaving it and using it and repurposing it. Although the road gets broken up quite a bit during the Parthians, but then they repair it because they want to help their infrastructure and they want to have power in India. So yeah, I guess I answered the question. Yeah,
I think you did.
all right. Any other questions? Yes.
The Greco-Romans and the Indians and the people of Afghanistan, when they communicated and traded with each other, did they look at each other as equals or as more like foreigners that they have to tolerate?
They look at them as equal to foreigners they could tolerate. The problem is with the Indo-Afghan people, Indo-Greeks, not a problem, is that they're already mixed. So because of that, it's not a big deal. So in fact, we know that they intermarried like everywhere. So intermarriage was very frequent. Get this. I mean, think about this. They talk about in ancient writings, Greeks wearing Greek outfits and worshiping Buddha. Is that weird? I mean, I think that just throws off everything. They're devoted to Buddha, and they're devoted to the Four Noble Truths and everything else. I mean, in fact, I actually quoted a few of those. Is that making sense? Well, a lot of that was in Afghanistan. What's interesting about Afghanistan is that there was a kernel of Theravadas there. I don't know how they got there. There's like a bunch of Theravadas there, and one of the Greek Bactrian kings, he actually stepped down from his throne and became an ascetic, Buddhist ascetic, like a monk. It's like, wow. So yeah, it's real. So yeah. Any other questions?
I think that's it.
I feel like I just ran a marathon, right?
So much information.
Is that a lot of information?
Yes.
Well, this is my field. So
That's why you're lecturing and not me.
this is what I do. Yeah, this is what I yeah. So I mean, we got to have so you can see this is my interest area and this is what I like to do. And I like I told you, I got so everybody believes me, physical evidence. 57 pages. Can you believe that? So, and I read, probably about maybe 25, maybe. So, yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you. Have
Okay.
a great night.
All right.
Wonderful.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, great having you here. I mean, there's just so many places you can go. this.